Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our online Christmas tasting. Thank you very much for joining us. And this evening, we're going to go through some suggested wines for Christmas Day. I'll go through the housekeeping rules first of all, which is that you're very welcome to leave your cameras on if you want, which is nice for me. It makes it less lonely. We are recording this session, but we're only going to be recording the speaker views, so we won't be recording anyone. If you leave your cameras on, you don't need to worry, you will not be recorded. We mute everyone just throughout the tasting so as that we can make sure that any questions can go into the chat. And the best way to hear in terms of the audio is to go into the speaker view. You'll get the best sound that way. We will take a break after the first three wines, just for a few minutes, to allow you to top up in terms of any food or water or anything else that you might need. And we record the session so that if you haven't been able to make it this evening, or if you would like to possibly listen again or taste along again with your wines, then there'll be a recording sent out tomorrow. Please continue to eat and drink throughout the tasting and have plenty of water. And I think that's all, because I actually can't see the rules. So let me just double check that I've said everything. We've also got Fionn and Fiona on this call in the background. So there are three of us. So if you need anything at all, then please don't hesitate to pop it in the chat, because we will be able to answer any questions that you might have. So let me just double check that I've said everything, that I've said everything that I need to say. And yes, there'll be a Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll try to answer them. Speaker view is the best in terms of being able to hear, and anything else. I think we've said it all now, which is good. Great. Okay. So now that the homework is all done, or the housekeeping is all done, I'll kick in. We're going to have 6 wines this evening, and we're going to taste in the order of the tasting sheet, basically. So the notes that were sent out with your tasting case, starting with the sparkling wine and ending with the sweet fortified wine. And the idea of this tasting is really just to give you some inspiration, whether it be for Christmas Day, which is what we'll focus the tasting on this evening, or whether it would be just to have some suggestions for festive wines, or wines to go with festive occasions over the holidays. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with fizz. And when I put these wines together, I've tried to pick a selection of wines that are both, in some instances, quite classic choices, but in other instances are slightly off the beaten track, to go and do something a bit alternative, just to give you some ideas that are slightly outside of the box. So while it is a traditional time of year, it's sometimes quite nice to go with something that's just a little bit different. So the first wine we're going to have this evening is actually from Sicily. Often for Christmas Day or for Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, I would definitely be suggesting champagne. But if you've got lots of people around, champagne can obviously be quite pricey, but also sometimes it's just good to go with something a bit off the beaten track. And this is the first wine this evening, and this is a Grillo, and this is from Sicily, and this is an organic sparkling Italian white. So without further ado, this has already been chilled. I'm going to open the fizz. And what I would say is, if you've got a big dinner party or a few friends round for Christmas Day or whatever it happens to be, there's a lot to do. So one of the things that I would always do in advance, I would always get the wines ready to open in advance. So in the case of the whites, I would basically uncork them all and pop the corks back in and put them in the fridge. In the case of the reds, again, they would be uncorked. And in the case of the fizz, I would remove the foil and just pull the wire out, which is a little round bit of wire that I think you can see if I hold it like so. And I'll just have it all ready to go, particularly if you have a few bottles to open. So sparkling Grillo from Sicily. Most important thing to do when you're opening a bottle of sparkling wine, whether it's champagne, whether it's Prosecco with a mushroom cork, whether it's in this case Southern Italian, or whether it's a cava or whatever it is. The most important thing is to do is very gently unscrew your foil, your wire cage, and just put your hand over the top, because the last thing you need is for that cork to go flying out and cause an issue for someone in the room or break a light bulb or something. And it's not actually the cork that you twist when you're opening fizz, it's actually the bottle. And that makes that whole process a bit more elegant and a bit more gentle. So I'm holding the cork in place, I'm twisting the bottle, and you have there a very nice, elegant pop, rather than a racing car celebration type pop. Now, I'm choosing to use this style of glass, which is almost like a wine glass, but very tapered at the top. You can, of course, use a flute style of glass, which would be more traditional, or in fact, you can use a saucer shape for fizz. What I would say is this style is what's very de rigueur in champagne at the moment, because it allows you to see the mousse, which are the bubbles, quite clearly in the sparkling wine, but also it allows you to really enjoy the aromas because it's tapered at the top, which keeps the aromas in the glass. Anyway, other important thing when you're pouring fizz is to pour it against the side of the glass. And this actually allows you to pour it gently, allows you to control how much has gone in the glass. And it means that you're not, you're not frothing over the top of the glass, which is always the danger with fizz. So sparkling Grillo from Sicily, and it's an organic wine. So the grapes are grown organically. So let's talk a little bit about this wine. I'll have a sip of water first of all. Please, if you have any questions as we go along, please pop them in the chat. So sparkling Grillo from Sicily. And Grillo is a great variety. And Sicily, obviously an island in the south of Italy. The main climatic conditions in that island is that it's warm and it's quite windy. So it's extremely easy to grow organic grapes, because even if it rains, the disease pressure is very low, because often that sunshine and wind dry the grapes very, very quickly. And there's not much exposure of the grapes to dampness or any of the issues that might cause rot or mold in the grapes. So quite easy to grow organic grapes in Sicily. But one of the reasons that I really like this wine is that this is a local Sicilian grape variety. So you really only would see it grown in Sicily. And it's known for slightly floral character. It's known for having nice fresh acidity. It's known for having ripe fruit, but also quite interesting peachy aromas and sometimes a bit of nuttiness in the wine as well. So let's have a smell. I'm definitely finding it quite citrusy actually on the nose. Touch of green apple, so quite a nice freshness. And then on the palate, I'm finding that quite dry. I've got that slightly peach, white stone fruit, maybe apricot type flavor, citrus, fresh, nice acidity, which you get the salivations at the side of the tongue, and but also not too dry. So quite a style that probably has quite wide appeal for a good decent group of people. So if you had a few people around, this would make a lovely aperitif. But I also think that this would actually go very nicely with certain starters as well, because it has the acidity. So we've actually, we buy this wine from a family company in Sicily. We've been working with them for many, many years. They're actually from Northern Italy, from the Veneto area. But indeed, the owner of the business bought an estate in Sicily, and he runs this estate now with his sister and his children. And right from day one, they actually decided that they were going to grow the grapes organically. So it's a small family business. This wine is not made in massive quantities. We first bought this wine for 2 or 3 years ago, actually, probably longer ago than that when I think about it. It's definitely pre-COVID. and it was quite successful, but we were only able to buy a few cases or 100 cases or so because it was an experimental vineyard at that stage. But since then, it was popular, people enjoyed it, and now we've got a reasonable supply of it, but it's not massively, it's never going to be huge volume wine. It's always going to be a sort of craft production size. The thing about it, I guess, is that it's a very good alternative to Prosecco, because whilst Prosecco is extremely popular, it can be, sometimes it can be a bit sweet for food. So to have something a bit drier is always a good option for fizz. So as I say, Christmas Day, or, you know, a supper, pre-dinner drinks, or even, you know, just with nibbles. It would also work nicely with things like smoked salmon on bellinis, I would suggest, maybe with goat's cheese. If you were in Sicily, you would definitely be having antipasta, so maybe you would be having some grilled vegetables or some cold platters of meat. And you could, if you wanted, definitely have it as an aperitif, but also you could definitely take it into starters if you wanted to, because it's dry enough. I would love to hear any comments on the Grillo, the Sicilian Grillo. If anyone has any comments on this particular wine. Is anyone matching? We've suggested savoury nibbles for this evening, but has anyone pop it into the chat if you've matched it with something differently? And we'd just be interested to hear how it's gone with any other options. Now, we do have a bottle of this Grillo to give away after the first two wines. We are looking for the most interesting question or the most interesting piece of information that you want to share in terms of, you know, whether you've matched this wine with something or whatever. So there's, all right, Valerie's saying that it was lovely with smoked salmon, which I think it would be, because it's got the acidity and then you've got the oiliness of the smoked salmon. So I think that those two things would be a really nice combination. In terms of serving temperatures, I know people do tend to get, you know, we actually put the serving temperatures, what we're suggesting for sparkling, for whites and for reds at the beginning of your tasting notes this evening. You know, we'd normally recommend that sparkling wine would be served around 8 degrees Celsius. That's because obviously you want it to be, you know, cool enough so that it's got, you know, so that the bubbles are, well, so as it doesn't fizz over, if you like, when you open it. So you want it to be cool enough so that you can enjoy the freshness and that you don't lose half the bottle when you open it, because to be honest, if it's warm, it's one of the reasons why sparkling wine fizzes over. So 8 degrees is our sort of suggested serving temperature on this. Or if you're in my house on Christmas Day, I tend to pop it in the back door step, and that tends to do the job if the fridge is overfull, which it quite often can be. So that was the Grillo. Okay, so wine number 2 then. I see, sorry, Kate is saying that it's lovely with nachos and hummus. So again, I think that's the point. It's a very versatile wine. It's a very affordable price point. The idea is that it's, you know, you don't have to be too worried about breaking the bank with it. Dry enough to go with food and not so dry that it isn't a nice aperitif on its own. So the idea of this wine style is, I think, it's absolute versatility. So keep the questions and keep the comments coming in, because as I say, we're going to give a bottle away of the Grillo after the second wine. So anyone that's got any questions or suggestions or sharing their food matches with us, Fiona and Fionn will pick a winner after the second wine to send a bottle to. Okay, so the first table wine, if you like, is Gial Albarino, which those of you that know me will know that this is my own Albarino, which I make in Galicia in Spain with one of our Brian's wineries called Lagarda Costa. And I've chosen an Albarino to go with a starter, but also I think it could go nicely with turkey. And we drink a lot of Sauvignon Blanc in Ireland, and we also like Chardonnay, but our second probably in the top 4 anyway, if you take our top 4 grape varieties in Ireland that we enjoy in terms of white grape varieties, Sauvignon Blanc, Albarino, Pinot Grigio and Chardonnay. And Albarino has wide appeal. And I always think that for people who enjoy Sauvignon Blanc, Albarino is a good alternative. It's made in a very similar way insofar as that it's made in stainless steel rather than oak. And the idea of freshness, good acidity and versatility of style, Sauvignon Blanc and Albarino would share those common, if you like, personalities. And this particular Albarino comes from a shoreline vineyard, and the story is basically on the back label, but it's a shoreline vineyard. And when you're standing in the vineyard, you're basically only a few feet away from the Atlantic. And the vines are between 35 and 40 years old. They're hand-picked. They're grown in high trellises. So when you're picking the grapes, as I was this year, you're literally under the vines like this, looking up and picking the grapes with both hands. And then the grapes come back to the winery, they're crushed, they go into stainless steel tank to be fermented. And the only other thing that happens with this wine is that after the fermentation, it goes into a concrete egg in the cellars to be aged. And the idea of that concrete egg is that it gives texture and roundness and more body, and it basically gives the spent yeast lees, if you like, give a bit of creaminess to the wine. So Albarino is a really good food wine. Now, in terms of wine glasses, I'm using something like this. Again, a bit like the champagne glass, you've got, it's a basic tulip shape. So when you pour the wine into the glass, you know, you can pour and see the color nicely. You can hold the glass and have a, you know, have a good look at the color of the wine. You've got the opportunity to agitate slightly to allow the aromas onto the surface of the glass of wine, and that oxygen on the surface of the glass of wine releases the aromas and allows you to smell the wine more clearly, if you like, and the slight tulip shape directs those aromas to the top of the glass, and it just makes the your ability to smell the aromas more fully. I think at this time of year, particularly when we've got lots of people coming around for dinner, you can get quite stressed about your wine glasses and whether they're going to be okay and whether they all look the same and whether the right type of glasses or whatever. And to be honest, I'll be the first to admit that I've got a kind of mixture of wine glasses in the house. And I think the most important thing about wine glasses, I don't think it really matters that much if you match them. Sometimes now when you go to kind of trendy restaurants in Spain or Italy or Portugal, it's almost fashionable to have different glasses, even different crockery on the table, different chairs at the table, different colors of cushions. So I don't think you need to go to any expense if you don't have enough wine glasses that are the same. I honestly would advocate using what you've got. The most important thing is to drink your wine out of a glass that you enjoy, a glass that you like. And if everything isn't matching perfectly, then I think that's a great opportunity to mix up the color of your flowers on the table, the candles on the table, the napkins on the table, the crockery on the table, and just make an event of having things that are a bit different. And I think it just brings a bit of fun to, a festive meal. So I wouldn't be too stressed if you don't have 10 glasses all the same, or 20 glasses all the same, or whatever it happens to be in terms of numbers of people you're catering for. I think, have a bit of fun with it and mix it up a bit. Okay, so white wines we tend to serve at between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius. So obviously cool, but not cold. We don't want them too cold, because if they're too cold, it masks aromas and it masks the flavors of the wine. So we tend to be between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius in terms of serving temperature for white wines. So let's have a chat about the Gial Albarino. I'm going to put it back up here so as you can see it. Oh, I should say that this design on the label is based on, is inspired by Charles Rennie Mackintosh. who was a Glaswegian arts and crafts artist, but also famous architect. And the Celtic writing is the same. And Gial actually means bright, white, clear, vibrant. So a good name, I think, for a a wide grape variety, such as Albarino, which is very vibrant and bright in its personality. So we've got a couple of questions here. Thank you for the questions. Makes me less lonely. How long can you keep both once they're open? Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Anne. In reality, the white's going to keep longer than the fizz. I would definitely, and I have definitely had the Gial open for a couple of days in the fridge, just recorked, and it's still absolutely, fresh as a daisy. So I wouldn't have a problem with that. You can buy a kind of pump thing called a vacuvan, which is not that expensive, and it puts a bit of removes the oxygen, if you like, from the neck of the bottle, or 3/4 of the bottle, or whatever it is that you've maybe had a glass out of, and then it gives you a rubber stopper, and that would potentially keep it a bit fresher than just popping the cork back in. But definitely a couple of days would be okay in the white. On the fizz, it's a bit harder. I would say normally a sparkling wine would still be sparkling the day after that you've opened it. If it's it may be slightly less sparkling than when you first opened it, but it would still definitely have a bit of fizz. And to be honest, I don't think beyond a day with the sparkling is realistic. The wine itself will still be fine, but as the days go on, the fizz will disappear, and you would, you'll end up with a wine, but not a sparkling wine. So I definitely, I wouldn't really, for a fizz, I would tend to try to drink it on the day, really, if you can. And the thing with fizz is that you don't need to just contain yourself to, say, aperitifs or starters. With fizz, you could definitely have it at the end of the meal. If you could imagine, how refreshing the Grillo would be with, say, a fruit-based dessert, or even chocolate, or even, as I say, fresh strawberries, a tart tatin, that type of thing, then the Grillo can work really nicely with that as well. Or you can even do cocktails, like blinis and add peach juice or whatever. So, I mean, it is quite a versatile bottle. So I think, you could possibly find ways to use it up on the same day, which would be the freshest and best way that you could have the fizz. But thanks for that question. Valerie's asking, what do you use to test the temperature of wine? Well, believe it or not, just a basic thermometer. I've got one actually in the kitchen. It's a long one. It is a wine thermometer. It's about this length. But to be honest, you could, as long as it's like an old-fashioned thermometer, that you just pop it in the glass, and that's how I would test it. Or you could pop it in the neck of the bottle if the bottle's open, Valerie. So nothing complicated or sophisticated. I think, just buy a thermometer at the chemist, or even at the like a brewing shop type of thing. They've got them as well. Okay, so the Gial Albarino then. So I talk about Albarino quite a lot because I obviously make this particular Albarino, but I'm a big fan of Albarino. I like Galicia, the fact that they're Atlantic vineyards, and all the vineyards, if you like, to a greater or lesser extent in Galicia and Rías Baixas in Spain, are influenced by the Atlantic. So what does that mean? It means that in the case of this particular vineyard, it's so close to the ocean that you've got the salt being carried on the wind, if you like, into the vineyards. In the case of the Gial, you've got granitic soils and sandy soils, which means that those vines don't particularly retain water. So you get very good concentration in the grapes. They have about 1,400 millimeters of rain a year in Rías Baixas, so it's more than Dublin. But most of that rain falls in the winter. And in the summer, they do tend to have high sunshine hours. So even though if you look at the rainfall, it looks a lot, but in fact, it mainly falls in the winter. So sunny weather and enough to ripen Albarino grapes. So Albarino typical descriptors for the Albarino grape would be things like green apple, green gauge, which is a green plum. In the case of the vineyards close to the beach, you might get some salinity and maybe a touch of citrus as well. And then on the palate, it's extremely dry. It's got good acidity. And you've got that you've got the slight salivation at the sides of your tongue, which indicates to you that you've got a wine with quite high acidity levels. And acidity is important, obviously, for the aging of the wine, but also for the balance within the wine. And acidity means for any wine, whether it's a Chablis, a Sancerre, a Sauvignon, or an Albarino, acidity is really important in terms of being able to match the wine to food, because it keeps everything fresh and balanced on the palate. In terms of fruit, I've got green apple, I've got citrus. I'm definitely picking up a saline note on the palate. And then I've got a good sort of intensity and texture on the palate as well. So a bit of roundness there on the palate. So fresh, clean, crisp, but also a bit of hint of roundness there on the palate. The food match that we are suggesting is a seafood platter with this Albarino. If you were in Galicia, has anyone been to Galicia? You can pop up on the chat if you've been to Galicia. But if you were in Galicia, you would definitely be drinking this with mussels, with possibly prawns, any kind of shellfish, you know, things like maybe crabs and you know, any kind of seafood at all. But I also think it works really well with you know, Spanish cheese such as manchego. It's good with Padron peppers. Actually come from Rijs Baixas. The Padron area is in Rijs Baixas, so I always think it's quite nice to have this Albarino with the Padrons. So quite a versatile food match. And I've put it into the tasting because I also think not only can it work very well with a starter, but I also think it could definitely go with turkey on Christmas Day. So if you're looking for crisp, fresh, dry style to match with turkey on Christmas Day, then I do think that this Albarino could work very well with it. Don't forget there's a bottle of Grillo Fizz up for grabs. So if there are any questions about any of these wines or any food matching, can anyone tell me what they're matching the Albarino with? I know we got some feedback on the Grillo, but if anyone could tell me what they were doing with the Albarino, I'd be really interested to hear. So we're going to move on to the third wine then, which is the Delheim, which is basically also a white wine, and this is Delheim Chardonnay. So this is South African Chardonnay, and I'm not sure, it's probably worth mentioning that quite often at this time of year, people would quite often go for a classic white wine for Turkey, and often that would be, say, a white Burgundy, or in fact something from the Loire Valley. But the stage that we're at the moment in terms of the vintages of wines in the shops, we're on the 2021 vintages in most cases for the whites, and the 2021 vintages in the sort of classic wine regions of France, which would be Sancerre and Burgundy, were extremely difficult because depending on where you were, you either had frost you had hot weather in March, which meant that the vines, the bud burst, which is when the vines burst into life, was early, and it meant the vines were very advanced. And then unfortunately there was spring frosts, and because the vines were so advanced, they were very, very badly damaged in the frost. So some producers lost as much as 70% of their production. And then following that, in some areas there was hail in the summer, which the hailstones were the size and bigger in some cases than golf balls. So there was many producers that lost, between 70 and 85% of their harvest. So, and needless to say, there's both shortages and there has been price increases in some of these classic areas. Now, fear not, if you're looking for a bottle of classic white Burgundy or classic Sancerre or Puy Fumé, then fear not, they are in the shops. But I thought it would be good to show an alternative Chardonnay. So a Burgundian style, if you like, but from another area in the world. And as I say, this is the Delheim Chardonnay Surly from Stellenbosch in South Africa. And it's the 2021 vintage. So why show the Stellenbosch Chardonnay? So basically Chardonnay is one of the grape varieties that wine makers and grape growers all over the world absolutely enjoy growing, because it's easy to grow. It behaves very well in lots of different soils and climates and growing locations. And it also is very easy to vinify. And if you get the right clones for the Chardonnay, then you can be very, very high quality Chardonnay in many, many places around the world. And one of our top selling non-Burgundian Chardonnays made in the Chardonnay style is this Delheim Chardonnay from Stellenbosch in South Africa. So this is a family winery again. So far, all of these wineries are small family wineries that I've been talking about this evening. And Delheim is owned by the Sperling family. And that's basically Nora, her parents, her brother, and about 15 Jack Russells run this particular vineyard in Stellenbosch. And one of their huge success stories has been the Chardonnay. And the reason that it's been such a success story is that it is made in the same way as the top Burgundy Chardonnay. So this would be really interesting, just in the first instance, to just smell this wine. And you'll smell automatically that it smells really rich. It's got, for me, it's got peaches and melons. It's almost like slightly creamy. There's a hint of toast, and the overall impression is of a wine that's going to be quite luscious and quite full flavored on the palate. So I think go ahead and have a sip of the Delheim Surly, and I'll talk about Surly in a second. So again, on the palate, this is a nice, dry, fresh, crisp impression overall. Got slight salivation on the sides of the tongue, again, indicating that bit of acidity. Not as much as the Giallo Albarino, but you've definitely got some there. You've got a creaminess, a toastiness. It's quite broad. It's got kind of peaches and cream type flavors. It's got a touch of hazelnut. And the overall impression of something quite mouth-filling and rich. And that character, if you like, is coming from two things. So it's coming from in the first instance, it's coming from the grape variety. It's coming from the fact that Stellenbosch is a warm area. They get lovely ripe grapes, and if anything, the one thing they have to manage is to make sure that they have enough acidity in the wines and that they don't leave the grapes to over ripen. And then the third thing that really feeds into the style of this wine is the winemaking, and it's in the name. Surly means that once the wine has been fermented, then it is left surly, which means on its lees, on its fine lees, on a spent yeast lees for a few months. And what that basically does is it gives structure, concentration, gives power, it gives spreads. Still looking for balance the whole time in the wine, but it gives quite a big mouth-feeling richness and texture to the wine. And also there's an element of this wine that has a tiny bit of barrel fermentation, and not because there's a desire for wood flavor in the wine, but there's a desire for the complexity that that particular element of winemaking can bring to the wine. So quite a lot of winemaking in this wine, but very traditional Burgundian style winemaking, which is why I think it's such a popular style for us. And it offers really good value, because although you know, it's not an inexpensive bottle of wine, but it's good value in the context of the fact that it does go towards you know, a Merceau style or a Pouligny-Montrachet style from some of the top villages in Burgundy. So I think it's a good option. I've matched it with turkey. I just thought that it was a good, you know, it's a good alternative to you know, Burgundian Chardonnay for Christmas Day. I've also suggested it with nut roast, but I also think it would be lovely with smoked salmon. I think it would be really good with anything that's got a bit of richness. So even a white fish that's got a nice sort of butter sauce or something like that, I also think it would work really well. So Anne said that delicious with roast chicken, which I'm not sure, Anne, sorry, you might let us know that it's work. Is that for the Guial or was that for the Chardonnay? And Valerie is trying this with blue cheese and it works very well. And again, I'm not quite sure, Valerie, if that's the Guial or the Chardonnay, but it sounds like people have got nice food in front of them tonight, which is nice. Ah, yeah, the blue cheese with the Chardonnay, great, okay. Well, that and the Chardonnay, Anne, as well. So that's good to get some other alternatives. So roast chicken, I think, yeah, perfect with the Chardonnay, and blue cheese also, again, nice with the Chardonnay. And I just think with wine, you know, there are rules about food matching and what should go with what, and what you know, what wines work well with what. But to be honest, I always just think you should enjoy what you enjoy eating and match it with the wine that you like, and experiment as well, because, you know, the idea that there's one type of food goes with one type of wine, and with today's cuisine it was easier almost to come up with food matching when there was, you know, everything was very traditional. Okay, hi everyone, welcome back to our tasting. So I think the first thing we're going to do is announce the winner of the bottle of Grillo for the first round, and it was the question about serving temperatures. Was yes, Valerie was asking about serving temperatures and how you tested for the temperatures. So Valerie is going to have a bottle of Grillo winging her way towards her. Valerie, we'll just need to get your details of Fiona. Fiona will get your details and we'll get that bottle of Grillo out to you. So we're also going to do a bottle of I also do a bottle for the second round as well. So I think we'll do a bottle of the La Rose de Pan, which is the Bordeaux that we're going to taste in a minute. So keep the questions or comments or thoughts coming in, because there's another bottle going to wing its way out to someone in the second round as well. So, okay, so we've talked about the Delheim. There's just a couple of questions which I'm going to go to before we move on to the reds. And this is from Paul. It says, has there been an equalization in terms of white wine being seen as a match for Turkey as opposed to traditional idea of red wine only? Yeah, I think probably, Paul, we'd be asked as often what white wine to go with Turkey as we would red, and I'm about to talk about the red wine with Turkey option next, actually, because we've obviously talked about the Delheim and said that that's a good match with Turkey, but then I'm going to start talking about the red wine in Turkey as well, and I think it depends, but I think we would probably see as many people asking about white wine options for Turkey as we do red. So I think there is definitely that move. People, you know, maybe having both on the table on Christmas Day. And the idea of the selection is that you can actually move it across the various courses. So my idea with the Grillo was that you could have it as an aperitif, or you could move it into starter. The Guial I was suggesting could be starter, or it could be with the Turkey main. the Delheim could be with the Turkey main, but the thing with the Delheim, it's rich enough that if you wanted to, and again, a bit of a fashion thing at the moment is to have a rich white wine with some cheese, and you know, the white cheese as well as we had the blue cheese suggestion there, but things like the Manchego, things like Brie, things like Camembert, it can be really nice to have a white wine with it. And then with the moving on to the reds then. So I've gone for 2 reds. I'm suggesting, first of all, quite a light style of red wine. And I've actually gone with wine from Austria. And this is Lusten Lorn is the name of the estate, which is basically the husband and wife who run this estate. This is a tiny estate actually. And the Zool is, this is a lighter, fresher style of red. And it's a combination of Pinot Noir and Zweingeld. So I'm just going to, you'll see this is a screw cap, which is a nice, easy option if you've got loads of guests over. It's nice to have something in a screw cap bottle. Now I'm going with this shape of glass. This is quite a nice shape of glass for lighter reds. You can see it's like a more balloon shaped, also tapered at the top, to allow for you to get the aromas of the wine. But I think that this is a nice shape of glass for a lighter red. Now, definitely with turkey or with white meats, and in fact, even these days with fish, quite often red wine has been served with white fish these days. The idea really is to have something that isn't too overpowering with the food. Now, this here, the alcohol on this particular Austrian is 13%. So it's at the lighter end of the red wine scale, I suppose you would say. And if you are a person that doesn't want too much alcohol in your reds, you know, if you're not a 14.5% alcohol fan in your red wines, then if you look to Northern Europe, that's a good option in terms of going for lighter reds. So Northern Europe, I mean Germany, I mean Austria, the Loire Valley is a good option for reds if you don't want, you know, if you're looking for 12.5, 13, 12%. And then from the Southern Hemisphere, if you were to look at, say, Marlborough Pinot Noirs, then again, most vintages would have a lighter element of alcohol in them and not as heavy, say 14 or 14.5%. Now, I always like to talk about lighter reds with turkey because you don't, as I say, want something that's too overwhelming with the food. And I think that this is a nice alternative to just a straight Pinot Noir. So I've gone with an Austrian red, so slightly off the beaten track for this one. And this basically is, for me, it's got quite savoury aromas. It's got slightly bramble and some raspberry type aromas as well. So sort of combination of red and black fruit aromas. And a touch of spice there on the nose. And then again on the palate, I'm getting a bit of bramble, a bit of raspberry, some spice. And then to talk about the tannin, so the grip on the gums, if you like, of the tannin, it's not too powerful, it's quite gentle. Nice bit of acidity and freshness on the palate. So everything is really nicely balanced there. And so the fruit, the acid, the tannin, the flavors, everything is just, you know, very nicely balanced. And the overall impression is that this is quite a, you know, a nice, fresh, delicate, quite elegant red. And I think that it has enough structure that it would work well with all of the trimmings, such as sausages and gravy and cranberry and so on, but also not overpowering for, say, the sort of the delicacy of a white turkey meat. And I've also suggested nut roast with this as well, because obviously, you know, it doesn't have to be a meat-based dish that it goes with. Someone has asked, Valerie, I think, said, cheeky question, do you have a wine guilty pleasure? Oh, I have a good few of them, Valerie, I definitely do. Desert Island I love champagne. I like the fact, you know, champagne would be one of my favorite wines. I'm always really interested to try unusual grape varieties that you wouldn't see, you know, so Italy or Portugal in Europe would be really good countries for having unique and indigenous grape varieties that you're not going to see anywhere else. So yeah, that would actually be a good question to put out there to everyone and say, what is your wine guilty pleasure? I'd be interested to hear. Well, Valerie, I'll have to ask you the same back. What's your wine guilty pleasure? And then anyone else that's got desert island wines or wine guilty pleasure, we'd love to hear about them. It would be good to hear. Okay, so that is what do we think of the lighter red? Anybody get any thoughts on that, of the Azul? Anyone get any thoughts, or anyone have any good matches that went well with that? Is that a good option for Christmas Day, or even like light festive suppers where just want something juicy and light and fruity to enjoy with you know, casual suppers? Is that a good option? Do you like that lighter style of red, or do people not like it? I'd love to hear people's views on that. It would be good to hear. Okay. Right, moving on then, I'm going to talk about a richer, heavier red. Now, we're suggesting that this is a Merlot Cabernet Sauvignon from Bordeaux, and I'm suggesting that this goes with the cheese platter. But to be honest, again, I like the idea of versatility of these wines, and I don't like to get too hung up in rules and regulations around the wines. So for this particular wine, I would be saying, if you want a heavier red with, say, a traditional roast turkey, or, you know, duck or roast beef or lamb or whatever, I do think this Bordeaux would be a good option for that. But I also think it would be a good option for, it would be a really good option for the cheese platter. So I'm going to take it here first of all and show you. So this is La Rose de Pan, which is a Bordeaux Superior. It's actually grown in the Entre de Mer in Bordeaux. You can see that it's actually got 90 points in Wine Enthusiast, which is an American wine critic magazine. So it's actually quite, that's quite a high score, 90 points out of 100. And then it's also sustainably farmed, and it's a small, it's actually a small, again, family business. They originally state, as you can see, is it there on the notes? No. Well, the original estate was actually set up by a botanist, and he chose the area on the basis of the plants that were growing there and what he then thought was going to be a really successful area to grow vineyards. So that's the Bordeaux that we're going to taste in a second. Valerie's saying she'd have, I'd say a glass of cava is always an evening, always starts evening in a right note, particularly if people over. Completely agree with you, Valerie. I think, I don't think you need to be guilty about cava, but but I think you're right. It's a good thing to start the evening off, and it's again good with nibbles or good with starter. You know, it's a versatile style. So I'm going to talk a little bit about decanting red wines now, because we've got quite a, you know, the Bordeaux is a bigger, chunkier red, much bigger in concentration and flavour than the Austrian red. So I wanted to just talk slightly about decanting. Now, this is 2019, which is one of the best vintages in Bordeaux. It's known to be a fruit-forward vintage. So even though 2019 might sound quite young, I found this wine this year on a trip to Bordeaux, and I bought it specifically to release it at Christmas time, because I thought that it was actually so fruit-forward and that the tannins were quite supple and soft, that it would be a good drinking wine at Christmas time. Having said that, I think sometimes, even though this is quite approachable, sometimes it can benefit from being in a decanter, just to allow the air to get to it, and it just allows the wine to develop a bit before you drink it. So I'm using this decanter here. Any shape, any size. Decanters don't have to be expensive. you'll see them, lots of stores are carrying wine decanters now. They're kind of quite trendy again. And, you know, in a case of a youthful wine like this, there is no sediment, so you don't really need to worry about whether, you know, whether you're going to pour sediment into the decanter or not. But I think it's just quite a nice idea to decant red wine because it adds to the occasion. If you like, on Christmas Day, to have a nice decanter of red on the table. And it just brings a bit of something different and something a bit celebratory to a dinner when you've got a, you know, when you've got a decanter of red. Now, ironically, in terms of, just make sure I don't spill this, but ironically, in terms of older wines, which is what you may imagine should be decanted, sometimes the last thing you want to do with an older wine is decant it, because if it's older, it's more delicate, and as the oxygen gets to the surface of the wine, an older wine can fall apart quite quickly if it's decanted. So sometimes an older wine is better left in the bottle and not decanted, in fact. How do you know if a wine needs decanting? Well, that's a very good question. Thank you for that question, Anne. Basically, if you taste, when you open your wine and you're going to taste your wine that you're going to serve with your dinner, first thing I would always suggest is that you open your wine before your guests arrive and just taste it yourself and make sure you're happy with it and set it aside. If you think that that wine feels really tannic in the mouth, or it feels that it's really, maybe it's very quiet, maybe it doesn't have much aromas, or the flavors are all very closed, sometimes that's because it's very youthful. And, you know, to decant could actually be a good option to open that wine up. Decanting then, in the case of something like an old port, you would decant if you knew that there was a sediment and you needed to not pour that sediment when you're pouring the glasses. So if you have something that's got lots of sediment, which you can tell by holding it up to, say, a candle or a table light, say, hold your bottle up, and if you can see sediment, sit it up for 24 to 48 hours before you want to serve it, and then basically decant it just before you're going to serve it. And again, you would decant it with, say, a table light or a spotlight behind you or a candle behind you, and you pour like so, as I showed you doing, but you would pour it in such a way that you could see the light through the bottle, and the sediment, if you sat it up, the sediment will be in the bottom of the bottle, and if you get the light to hit the bottom of the bottle, you'll be able to pour until you've got most of the bottle gone, and then what's left here in the bottom is the sediment with a bit of wine. That sediment is fantastic for cooking, for making you know, a nice gravy or a nice sauce that calls for a red wine. The sediment will break down in the cooking process and it will add loads of flavour to your dishes. So I hope that answers how do you know if a wine needs decanting. The only real reason is for, in terms of technically, is if it's got sediment, which we've just talked about, or for fun and theatre, which I've also just talked about. And sometimes white wines can look beautiful in a decanter. Again, it's not something that we talk about, but say, for example, the Delheim Chardonnay, which is quite a deep golden colour, can look fabulous in a decanter on a festive table. So 2 reasons to decant: sediment and fun and festivities are the other reason to decant. Okay, so the Bordeaux then, if you held a piece of white paper underneath the glass, you see it's quite a bit darker than the Austrian wine, but it's a completely different colour, and it's actually got a bit of fade on the rim of the colour, which means that the wine is starting to evolve and it's starting to develop some age in the bottle. In terms of the aromas of the Bordeaux, for me, this is actually quite savoury. It's got quite licorice notes, there's hints of spice and tobacco there. And there's black fruits for me, is cassis, is brambles, it's yeah, black currants, cassis, brambles, maybe even some blueberries or something like that. So immediately on the nose, you can sense that this is a much more powerful red than the Austrian red. So definitely can stand up to food a lot more than the Austrian. So roast beef, roast lamb, casseroles. Yes, definitely with turkey if you're looking for something richer, but also things like goose or duck or that type of thing as well. And then on the palate then, so on the palate, I'm getting the spice again. I'm really getting sort of black fruits, brambles, blueberries, black currants, like much more powerful fruits. I've got a hint of licorice there. I've actually got a bit of a kind of thyme, rosemary type fresh herb. And then you've got some nice refreshing acidity. The tannin is there. I've got more grip than with the Austrian wine, but I actually find these tannins really ripe. So I hope you'll agree with me that even though this is a 2019, so maybe a relatively young Bordeaux, it's actually drinking very well. It's basically a Merlot Cabernet Sauvignon blend, and the winning formula for this wine being so accessible is that the 2019 was lovely warm year, so nice ripe grapes, which gives good fruit in the wine once the wine is made. But the other thing is that the fact that it's what we would say is Merlot dominant or Merlot led. So there's more Merlot in this wine than Cabernet Sauvignon. Merlot tends to be silky, sort of satiny flavor profiles, tends to have less tannin, and it tends to be, the fruit tends to be riper and maybe a sort of plummy character. The Cabernet tends to give a bit more cassis notes, but it also gives a bit more tannin, a bit more structure to the wine. So I hope you enjoy that Merlot Cabernet, and it's Chateau Le Rose de la Panne. And as I say, it's also got 90 points wine enthusiast, so sustainably farmed as well. So ticking quite a few boxes. Jim is asking, does this get better with age? Could you hold this for a few years? I think you might be talking about the the Bordeaux there, Jim. If you could just clarify, I would say that if you are talking about Bordeaux, yeah, absolutely, it definitely will improve with age. The structure will become softer, and the fruit will become less primary. At the moment, this is what the fruit is, very primary, which means that it's you really are getting the real kind of, as if it's fresh fruit, you're getting very obvious cassis and you know, very obvious upfront fruity notes both on the palate and on the nose. But as this wine develops over time, it will the fruit will soften, the tannins will soften, the oak will soften, and everything will just come together a bit more. But for me, definitely, I think you're definitely talking a minimum of 5 years aging, and you know, you could keep it for longer. So hopefully that answers the question, Jim. Fiona's asking if it's currently available on the website. I think that's again, I think that's the Bordeaux. If it's not, Fiona, if you can let me know. We the website is constantly currently being restocked, so if it's not there today, it's possibly there tomorrow. But I can tell you, all of these wines, we've got good stock coverage in the shops, and someone will check the website for us. If you could just confirm, Fiona, if it's the Bordeaux that you're asking about. Kate is asking if you could chill it. Yes, you definitely could if you wanted to. I mean, I think you can't chill the Bordeaux too much because the tannins, which are quite present, would actually be elevated if you chill this wine. The Austrian wine, you definitely could chill, because you know, you would, you know, you could chill that down slightly. If you were in the summer, you could definitely chill the Austrian wine. But you don't want, I mean, we talk about, maybe this is more helpful to talk about this, Kate, but we talk about room temperatures with reds. But the room temperature rule with red wine was sort of set in place before there was central heating. So I suppose room temperature would be something like 16 and maybe 18 degrees. It wouldn't be like 24 degrees with the fire blasting in the central heating, full blast at Christmas Day. So if you were in Bordeaux, and you would expect this wine to be maybe served at 15 to 16 degrees Celsius. So definitely not what we would consider to be room temperature in this day and age. I would always, with the reds, at Christmas time, put them in a cooler room in the house, whether it's a room that's not been used, or whether it's the porch, or somewhere that everything isn't getting absolutely, cooked with the heat of the, on the Christmas day in the house. So you could chill it if you wanted to, but typically 15 to 16 degrees would be a good serving temperature. Let's just take another question then. Which of the turkey wines would you give as a present? I think it depends, and I've picked two different things, Paul. I've gone a bit funky on the Austrian, really small niche producer, husband and wife team with, unusual grape varieties, funky packaging in terms of this like really colorful packaging. So for me, I think I've gone quite contemporary with this one and gone for something, a complete, completely different, completely a bit off the beaten track and something a bit different. So if you've got that kind of person in your life that you want to give them something a bit different, a bit, contemporary, then I definitely would go with the Austrian. If you've got someone a bit more traditional, or you want to bring someone on a Bordeaux journey, to give them, a Bordeaux that they're really just trying to get into Bordeaux. So I think this suits both traditional Bordeaux, person who loves a nice chunky Bordeaux red, or I think it's got, the tannins are soft enough and the fruit is ripe enough that you could actually give this to someone who's just starting to get into Bordeaux or starting to get into classic wine regions. So look, I know I haven't answered the question because I've not picked one, but I would say it depends on the person. And that's why I've actually picked two styles of wine, Paul, to go with turkey, because I think, that's the great thing about wine. There's something out there for everyone. So I don't know if that's helpful, but hopefully it is in terms of answering your question. So Fiona from O'Brien's, our marketing manager, is saying the Chateau Le Rose de Pan is not currently available online, but it's in the local shops, and you can sign in to get an email for when it comes back into stock in terms of Le Rose de Pan. Yeah, as I say, the website's constantly, their stock comes into the website every single day. So if it's not there today, you can, you could check again tomorrow as well. It's we're constantly updating the website in terms of stock. Okay, so that was Le Rose de Pan. And then we're going to talk then about the sixth wine. Bear in mind, we've got a bottle of Le Rose de Pan to give away for the most interesting questions. So you're not allowed to fall asleep at this stage of the tasting. You've got to keep paying attention. It's just, I think we've got two people waiting to come in. Okay, right, okay, two people joining, right. So with the final wine, I've actually gone with a sweet fortified wine, and I've not gone with port, because again, I've tried to pick something a bit different, and I've gone with this Gerard Bertrand, and this is a Reeve salt, and it's from the 2011 vintage, and it's a VDN, which means a Vin Doux Naturel. Now, back to our conversation about glasses. I've actually poured this myself into water for crystal glass. I don't use my crystal glasses that often, but I think if we can't get our nice glasses out, or our slightly glitzy glasses out at Christmas time, then I don't know when we can do it. And you can see in the beautiful color, it's a beautiful amber color of this Reeve salt. So this is from the Languedoc, and Gerard Bertrand is one of the, he's one of the most highly accoladed winemakers in the world, never mind France, but he's also one of the top, in terms of quantity, one of the biggest organic and biodynamic wine growers in France and in Europe. And basically it's a family company, but he owns about 15 different estates. And one of the things that he does is he tries to rescue ancient grape varieties and replant them. It tries to rescue vineyards that are, you know, with ancient grape varieties, or indeed traditional ancient winemaking styles. And basically this Rive Salt is a traditional winemaking style. So it's made, it's a blend of Grenache and Shiraz or Syrah in France. So 2 red grapes. And what happens with this particular wine, it's made in the same way as a table wine. It's vinified in the same way as a table wine, but the vinification is stopped with, if you like, grape spirit. And that stopping the fermentation does 2 things: leaves the wine sweet, but it also increases the alcohol of the wine. So this VDN is 16% alcohol. So, you know, not hugely alcoholic, but definitely more alcoholic than a table wine would be. And as I say, you can see the beautiful golden color. The redness in the grapes hasn't been retained. Slightly oxidative style of winemaking, which means that oxygen is allowed to change the aromas, flavors, and colors of the grape. And so the red grapes, but as you can see, gone amber because of the winemaking process. If you smell the wine, it's like Christmas pudding, raisins, like warm spices like cinnamon, star anise. Also, you can get a touch of honey on the nose. So from all of that, from the color and from the aromas, you're definitely getting the sense that you're going to be tasting something that's a bit sweet. So let's just go on and taste this Rive Salt. So you've definitely got, for me anyway, it's definitely got, you know, raisins, you know, other dried fruits. It's got honey, has got that cinnamon and slight star anise. It actually tastes like Christmas pudding. It's such a kind of luscious, Christmassy flavor profile for this wine. Which wine, Valerie, are we talking about? What's the ideal temperature on this wine? Is it the Rive Salt? The Bertrand? Okay. So for me, I actually didn't mention temperature yet, but what I would say, you've got 2 options on this, and it depends how you're going to serve this wine or what you're going to serve it with. You can serve it room temperature, definitely, or you can put this in the fridge. I actually put it in the fridge tonight. Because I actually love the fact that when it's in the fridge, I actually think it lifts the fruit a bit and it makes the flavor profile a bit more precise. But it can also be really nice if you're having a late, you know, supper and you just want to have a glass of something beside the fire afterwards. It can just be lovely at room temperature at that stage. Now, for me, as I say, I think it almost tastes like Christmas pudding. It almost smells like Christmas pudding. But I think there's a lot to be said for this style of fortified wine or vin doux naturel that can be, that can match savory foods as well as sweet foods. So, and I think you can say that for Sauterne, you can say it for Tokaj, Vin Santo. The obvious thing to do with those wines is to match those wines with, you know, Christmas pudding, trifle, any kind of fruit-based desserts, pavlovas or whatever it happens to be. But I think there's also the opportunity with these styles of wines to make them more versatile and match them with savory dishes. So definitely blue cheese for this style of wine is perfect. So Cachet Bleu or Crozet or something like that can work really, really well. Roquefort is another option if you want to have a French cheese with this wine. Works really well chilled, served with smoked salted almonds, for example, and also can be delicious with something like pâté. In France, quite often you would have foie gras with a sweet wine. So I think it's a good option for savoury food as well as sweet food. And it comes back to some extent the theme of this tasting, which is that you don't need to stick to one wine, one course, because you could serve this with your cheeses or you could serve it with your desserts. And I'm suggesting that you could do both, depending on what you were serving, depending, you know, how many people you had. And, you know, you could literally, if you didn't want to be too extreme with the cheese, you could actually have a small glass of this with a coffee and a really good quality chocolate. I mean, you know, you don't need to be, everything doesn't have to be complicated all the time. And sometimes, you know, a glass of this is a dessert in itself, if you know what I mean, if you wanted to think about it that way. So that's the, those are the 6 wines that we've gone through. I know we've had a good few questions there as we've gone through the second 3 wines. If anyone's got any more questions, because there's a bottle of Bordeaux to be sent out. So if anyone has any more questions in the next few minutes, then please, please send them in before we sign off. So just to recap, I hope that you enjoyed the tasting. Just to recap, we were suggesting that the fizz is a nice aperitif, or also can go very well with, you know, on its own, or with pre-dinner nibbles, or in fact, you could take it into a starter because it is dry enough and it has the acidity. The Giallo Albarino, we're suggesting starter, but can also work well with turkey, or another, you know, main. It could be nice with salmon, could be good with chicken, that type of thing. Jim is saying the star was the Grillo. Yeah, I agree, Jim. I think it showed really well tonight and really versatile. The Delheim Chardonnay, we're saying, can be with the main. If you wanted a richer white, you could also put that with starters, such as a smoked salmon. The Austrian red, we were suggesting with the main, and then we were also suggesting the Rose de Pan with the main, but also with the cheeses. And then the Rive Salt, we're saying, can go with cheese, but we can also equally put it with dessert as an option. So guys, O'Brien's team, who is the winner of the bottle of Bordeaux? I've just had a snow morning on my laptop. It's definitely time to talk about winter warming reds tonight, and nice meals beside, you know, nice meals. Unexpected Delight was Zool, but I agree the Grillo was super. That's what Valerie was saying. Yeah, I think the Zool's great, actually. I think it's so versatile, and it's nice to have a lighter red. Some people don't like having, you know, more than 1 glass of red, or, you know, it's a good introductory red, if you like. Yeah, the Zool is good. Paul was the winner for saying, has there been an equalization in terms of white wine being a match for turkey as opposed to traditional red? Okay, so congratulations, Paul. You have won the bottle of Bordeaux, the La Rose de Pan. So well done. I know that O'Brien's guys, Fiona will get in touch with you to get your address so as we can get those out to you, or get that out to you. So listen, guys, thank you very much for joining. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas, and I hope that you've enjoyed the wines, and that we've given you some inspiration, if not just for the festive meal on Christmas Day, but over the period of the festivities. I hope that we've given you some good ideas and some food for thought, and also given you some alternative options to just the classics. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone.